Welcome back to the channel, friends. I'm joined again by Master Philosopher King Aron van Os. He is a busybody right now. He warned me offline already, so if he's not animated by the spirit tonight, it's all good. We love
Thank you
him.
for having me again. I very much appreciate it.
Good, good. I'm happy to have you. Your videos somehow do better than the other ones, so I don't know why.
Mm.
Just a little better. But Aron is speaking very soon at the Mannheim Festival. So if you're only tuning in for 2 minutes, this you should know. Can
Yeah,
they
the,
still
the
buy
the
tickets?
Breakwater Festival in Mannheim.
Can they still buy tickets or
Yeah, I
no?
think you can. You can even buy them at the door. So,
Okay,
um,
that's good.
we can put the link in the description.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. I'll put everything in there.
Nice.
So basically, I want to ask my brother some questions. I told him offline that I have a log of questions for him that I update periodically. Um, and I have the same with some other thinkers if I ever get to speak to them. But I have the privilege of having this man's blood, so makes it easier. I wanted to start with a pretty general question, and that is, what is the importance of truth to you, if at all?
Um,
Is it important at all, actually?
yeah. It is. It is. It's a, but I'm not entirely sure if I'm made up my mind about it. If that makes sense. Um, and so, for instance, one quote by Nietzsche is, "We need art lest we perish from the truth." So for him, truth could be very dangerous. So in a sense, like, sometimes you could be, um, how should I say it? Like, he was afraid that sometimes the truth would take such a position that actually it would end up ruining life for people, that it would end up ruining. So for instance, the scientific um, search for, the final truths about the universe had the effect of undermining the belief in God, and therefore the belief in morality and truth itself. Like, so it's kind of like, so the search for truth ends up undermining itself, and if that's tied in with, I believe in that truth and therefore I ought to act morally, then the search for truth ends up debasing morality too. So it
Mm-hmm.
ends up undermining its own importance, the search for truth, but then also the importance of morality. So in that sense, I kind of agree with him. At the same time, I do think, like, truth, just like beauty and just like goodness, are three transcendentals: the true, the good, and the beautiful. And they are three pathways to an understanding of the transcendent. And what I've come to appreciate is that, that might for some people be leading them to God, but for others it might not. But it's clear that those are pathways, because they all like are able to disclose a different aspect of ultimate reality,
Mm-hmm.
as it and yeah, so I think truth in that sense is beautiful. And I if I can, I'd like to speak a bit more on it. Is just, um one other way in which I've been very much influenced by thinking about truth is from Heidegger, I'd say. So he looks at, and this also, like, Verveek, he briefly discussed this in his series as well. But I've read the works where he does this. Is he looks at truth as aletheia. So letheia, that means to cover something up. So truth is literally like a discovery, and that's also why it's like it's disclosure, like
Mm-hmm.
truth as disclosure, or truth as unhiddenness. So it was hidden and now it's unhidden. And he says that works better than, like, let's say, truth as correspondence, because the truth as correspondence really implies that, oh, like, there is this truth that is stable, like it corresponds to this ultimate reality, and therefore, you now create this. Whereas the truth as aletheia is really like, oh, this was hidden, but
Mm-hmm.
now it's uncovered. And then that also means that it's just like phenomenology, what Peugeot always talks about, like, I can focus on you, and therefore, like, a little bit of truth uncovers itself, but
Mm-hmm.
necessarily other things, like, they fade into the background and they
Yeah.
cover themselves up again. So truth is also something that comes to you like in the present and is here and now, and therefore also might briefly go away again. And so like there's many pathways to truth, and some of
Yeah.
them problematic and some of them very wonderful and actually very meaningful. So that's why I think it's a complex question.
Yeah,
But
I
yes, it does have
guess.
a value.
Okay, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, and I guess also we got to be clear on what constitutes truth, because I think a lot of people, when they think they're speaking about truth, they might actually be speaking about either a copy of truth or a plain falsehood. Because I
Mm-hmm.
was reminded while you were speaking of the idea of having a mystical experience, and then after having had this experience, to keep speaking about it or describing what you experienced, and then it's actually no longer
Mm-hmm.
that experience itself. It ran away from you, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
how do we
Yeah.
even know if we're dealing with truth when we're speaking about it? So,
Yeah.
and
Well,
then
that's like, so that's also why we would need dialogue. It's like or
yes,
I think so. I recently it's there's a great clip of Agnes Callard. It's a philosopher, and John Fake is also a big fan of her. She wrote this book Aspiration, but she also has a brief clip out where she tells about her love for Socrates, and she thinks that Socrates is really the one, and it's obviously via Plato, but who introduced that in us wanting to look for truth, there's always a competition between, you want to embrace certain truths, but at the same time, that's risky because you also want to avoid falsehood. And what if
yes,
some of the truths you embrace, like what you
exactly.
just said, like, what if you want to speak truthfully about your mystical experience, but then you're like, no, maybe this is a falsehood and it's constantly like competing, or it's like,
Hmm.
maybe, I think I should embrace the fact that there is an external reality and that I'm really talking to you right now, but at the same time, that could be false. Like technically, I could be dreaming, and there's this constant tension. So it's not like so. Her point is, it's not like avoiding falsehood and being committed to the truth are the same. Actually, like they are constantly in conflict. And she says, like what Socrates introduced was he was always talking to people and trying to take the opposite stance to them and being um, how should I say it, like he trusted the process, of that dialogue, as
I
opposed to
see.
like,
I see.
you're right or I'm right, because all the way avoiding falsehood, or all the way, and I think she actually compares this to like to a court case. Is like you might be the defense attorney and I might be the prosecution, and we're both pursuing justice together, but precisely by doing opposite things. Because if we would
Yes, I see.
only be defending, no one would be going to jail, or if we would only be prosecuting, everyone would be guilty. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, so I think it's a really nice analysis. But sorry, that's just it.
Oh,
Reminded
that's
me.
there's no apology needed for that. It's actually clarifying a lot of things in my mind, to look at the process as the actual truth, instead of the specific, um, let's say,
Hmm.
images that we are
Yeah.
that we seem to be following,
Yeah. Or I
and
would
that
say like the process facilitates the truth. So I'm not sure if the process itself is the truth. It depends kind of what you mean by truth then, but at least it will come up there, and it will never come
yes, I
up sort
see.
of in a single person. It's always
Yeah, and
right.
then we also have the big difference between, I don't know how I would describe it, truth, uh, and a capital T truth, or something that Peterson and Sam Harris spoke about the first time they had the
Hmm.
conversation, where Sam was basically speaking about scientific truth, let's say,
Yeah.
and Peterson was like, "But that's not exactly truth."
Yeah, exactly. And I also like, and I think the most important thing, and this is something that Vervaeke and I would say Wolfgang Schmidt, like they also emphasize this, is like it also it's self-undermining, because what happens then is that you say that physical truth is the most important truth, but what we know from a physical understanding of the world is actually that the most real thing we supposedly know about are those little probabilistic processes of motion, and there
Yeah,
you have like the collapse of the wave function. So that
yeah,
seems to be the only thing that's real, and therefore what we're really experiencing is not real, so that's not really true, and that is really true. And but then that's also confusing, because as Vervaeke points out, like we use certain instruments to measure that, So we put faith in the instruments of disclosing truth to us, and at the same
Yeah, yeah,
time
yeah.
that leads to a conclusion that says like, yeah, but the instruments aren't really true. So it's kind of like very
Hmm.
interesting. And he says like, and just like we end up diminishing it all the way down, like only the smallest thing is true. It's like you can also do that the other way around, only the biggest thing is true. So
Yeah.
it's, you also have to be careful in that way with that regard. Yeah, but for sure.
Okay. Do you think you can say anything that like about scientific truth as being actual truth? Because I mean, at the end of the day, there are images, let's say, of a greater
Mhm.
reality or
Yeah.
greater, I would say, a more stable reality because everything is changing in the cosmos. So do you latch
Mhm.
on to anything and say this is true, or do you just steer
Yeah,
clear
yeah,
from that?
yeah. No, I think I'm just happy um to live with different levels of truth, but not just
Hmm.
like, you have your truth and I have my truth and it's all great. It's like, no, I do mean like that it scales up
Yeah,
hierarchically,
and you
in that
aspire
sense.
to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's also like, when you get more in touch with reality, you feel like you're getting to truer levels of reality. Um, and but that makes me satisfied. So I notice like where the disconnect seems to be for many people is that they either want, oh, I want it to be true, but I don't know for sure if it's actually true, and
Hmm.
they're like, it either has to be true or not. And it's kind of like, yeah, but it can also scale up levels of truth. And and obviously scientific truth has a place there. It's just like that again is then grounded in another truth. And that really scales up quite a long way. And obviously we, as you already alluded to, we can't even disclose in words what the upper point of that would be. It's
Yeah,
kind of like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
guess we could refer to it, but we both know that won't cover it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm I'm satisfied with your answers, but I feel still that I mean, we're still speaking in words, so I guess we're having some issues, and we will
No,
continue to have them.
no, it's like we're using a map to talk about a territory,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
that's fine. That's fine. Like it is actually pointing to a territory, and that's
exactly.
okay. But we're
And we
not
can
saying
get
it is
closer.
the territory. We're not saying it is the territory,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's fine. But it's still useful. It's not like, oh, it's word, so it's useless. Like,
yeah. No,
no, no,
that's
no,
not.
no.
That's also not how I view it. It's
Yeah.
just that I feel that it was one of my major insights years back, where I was like, "Whoa, the language thing is so limited in a way, but when you get it to refer beyond itself, it can definitely help you get closer."
Hmm.
And it's something that I find very interesting to observe, and also
Yeah.
the Bitcoin circles or the more like materialistic circles, where, for example, Robert Breedlove's show is called "What Is Money," and he's so obsessed by this question that it's taking him 400 episodes to even begin to answer the question. And I know he keeps like a log of answers to this question, and he's basically come down to the idea that there is no answer, but that he's trying to get closer to it. And I think that's a beautiful way of describing it on every level. Like, you don't have to confine yourself to just money.
Hmm.
This is true for most concepts, but the idea that you can get closer to them is, I think, very powerful, because it means that it's actually useful to use these words. And I like, for example, the example that Vervaeke speaks about with justice, where he says, take the symbol, take Lady Justice in your mind, and really try to ponder what justice is before you actually speak about it, because sometimes we use words without even realizing what they mean, or their meaning is given by our, let's say, decadent version of the original meaning.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
justice
No.
can be reduced to fairness, for example. And
Hmm.
what is fair? Like, we don't even speak about that. We don't even go
Yeah.
back. We just assume everybody knows. Or
Hmm.
capitalism is a big term. It's like, what is it actually? Let's talk about it, because
Yeah.
not really not really
Yeah, no,
thinking about it yet.
that's by the way another reason why I like this so much. So like, as opposed, like, so you can also definitely do that with capitalism, but the nice thing about, truth and beauty and goodness is like they go back millennia. So it's like, so
Yeah.
you can discover again all the intricacies, like all the very intricate meanings that have like I should say like shown themselves through time to be meaningful to people, and therefore that gives you a better idea of, like, as Vervaeke like says, the through line of beauty itself,
Yeah.
which cannot itself be, and that's also, I think, useful, is that's yeah. So I actually want to briefly respond to, like, your conversation with our dad. It's like where you were asking about, is something like the ground of being God present in Exodus, because it relates to this. Because on the one hand, I totally want to state, like, obviously, yes, it is a very personalistic God, and that's actually an essential aspect of the Christian faith, that it's not just this
Yeah.
abstract non-personal God. So it's very important. So I'm not disputing that, but I also want to say that there are elements of the philosophical God, and I would say that I should say it, someone like what's his name, Thomas Aquinas. Yes, I'm thinking of the Dutch name. Like he actually, yeah, it's Thomas van Aquino in Dutch, but his understanding of God is simple. It's like he's saying God is being. So we still have, up to Aquinas, the notion that God itself is being, which is, like, obviously he is a forefather of contemporary Catholic thought. And he says, like, that's why God's nature is simple. God equals being, whereas like we're already, like, divisions down. So, like, we are being with form, and therefore, and matter, and therefore, like, we are beings, and therefore we're already less simple, because we partake in being, but we are more than that. So for him, it's actually like the divine simplicity is to exist. And he says, like, and one of his arguments, because he makes all these good philosophical arguments why that should be the case, but he also tries to make it scripturally sound, and he refers back to what Moses hears from the burning bush, is like, I am who I am, or I am who I will be. And that's kind of like, yes, because God is just saying, is equating himself with being and becoming. It's because that's God. Like, that's just what God is, for
Yeah.
that matter. So I'm saying, like, there is actually a lot of ground in there too. And I would also say, like, if what you see through the Exodus lectures is that what they try to uncover, because that's kind of what they do, what someone like Peterson does with the psychological lectures, is to say, like, he is really almost reducing it, risking to reduce it, but he's trying to say that he's treating it psychologically, to say, like, yeah, if you go out, if you free yourself from tyrannical oppression, then you're out in the desert, but that means, like, that you don't know how to live, like, you lack all discipline. So therefore, freedom on its own, which relates actually to our previous discussions, freedom on its own is not enough. It needs to be disciplined freedom, and it needs to have other aspects, so not just freedom from oppression. It's like, no, what does it actually mean to be free? And I would say, in those aspects, you also see, like, the I should say, like, the ground of being, because it's really about trying to discover, like, oh yeah, how does reality lay itself out? And that's way more fundamental than just, like, well, sorry, it's complementary. I should really be careful with my words. It's complementary to the notion that God is a person who we can pray to, and who we can, talk to, and conceptualize personalistically. It's really to add to that, like, yes, but God is also a process of being that uncovers itself through our interaction with it, and therefore God is the ground of being.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that to
No, perfect.
to the
Is
conversation.
the person an image?
Oh, I find it so difficult. I
Okay.
would be inclined to say yes, I because I would find it difficult. Like, just like, there's this idea that actually we shouldn't, like, that if we make images of God, which is also why it rarely happens in the iconoclastic traditions. It's like we make images of Jesus and of other disciples, but not really of God. It's because we risk reducing him to an image, and that's
Yes.
like,
Oh,
and
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I just want to
I
say,
think I
like, yeah.
misspoke.
Okay,
Is
yeah.
he a symbol? Because I think that's more accurate.
Um, well, first of all, obviously, I don't know, but if I have to think,
Well, let's say I'll clarify why I said this is because an image can be false, or at least lesser than. It
mm-hmm,
always is lesser than, actually, image
mm-hmm,
versus a form. But a symbol can refer beyond
yeah,
and toward. And so that is why I
Yeah,
think the symbolic understanding rings most true to me,
yeah.
and it
No,
makes sense for me.
and that's why I do think it's really beautiful to see how, the symbol of the Christian cross has carried so much meaning, because it is referring, and I think you put that very beautifully, like it's referring beyond itself and to itself at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, and so probably it is that case. I think there's definitely something to be to be said for what you're alluding to here. But um yeah, I want to be very careful. Like
Okay.
I
Okay.
really I think there's really good arguments on, like, on the theistic side, like both for divine personalism, so like that have a personality attached to God, and those that argue against that, that still believe in God but don't think that God can be a person of some sorts.
Mm.
And but I'd obviously totally agree with what our data said in terms of like psychological research, that it helps to
Yeah. Yeah.
conceptualize God as a
Yeah. Yeah.
person.
But does that make the person real, or at least the symbol of the person? Does it make it real to you? Is it real? And
Um,
then maybe this is more blurry than I'm making it out to be, because sometimes we want to measure real. We
I
want to.
would again say it does have to do with the levels again.
Okay. Okay.
So real in that sense is true, and therefore I would say that, the fact of calling, God a loving father, and that's how you contrast it a little bit. I know, it's problematic to say Old Testament God is, a
Yeah.
war God, and the New Testament God is loving, but it does seem to be the case that the New Testament nonetheless more strongly emphasizes the loving fatherly aspect of God, and the Old Testament God does so far less. Actually, like Jesus referred to him as a father, and it doesn't seem to be as strongly the case in the Old Testament. Um, but actually, by doing so, he gives God more symbolically and psychologically feminine elements in the New Testament, whereas in the Old Testament he was more associated with masculine elements. Um, so in that sense, I would say it's very useful grow to grow up with the image of a loving father, because you're kind of having the ideal parent. And that sounds, some people will misinterpret that and say like the ideal parent is a man. I'm precisely trying to say like the ideal parent is the ideal combination of masculinity and femininity.
Yeah.
And um, which can be very useful. And I would also say it's, and in that sense, like I do think a little bit scientifically, and I'm partly inspired by our dad for this, is like, chances are actually higher you'll grow up with just your mom as opposed to just your dad, if that happens to be the case. So, because like your mom is pregnant and your dad might have ran off in the 9 months in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if that's the case, then it also makes sense that you compensate that with a masculine image, even though that masculine image then is full of feminine attributes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like I just wanted to add that I think there's all these good reasons why we conceptualize God this way, and that at the same time, that if you then, like, as you talked about that Wolfgang Schmidt as the esoteric exoteric distinction as well, like you at some point move up, and then you're also okay with conceptualizing God in different ways, not because the old way was wrong, but because you recognize that there are different levels to the divine.
Yeah, I
uh,
see what you mean.
yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. So you don't deny the former. You just build upon it in some ways.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like this. This was one question. So
Okay.
well, I'm really thinking what I'm most interested in. Okay, I'm just gonna do this one first. Is there such a thing as being spiritual but not religious? Does it exist in your book? Is it possible? Because
Yes.
okay, well, I've
That's
been
right.
following the Symbolic World podcast, of course, as of you, and many times he makes fun of this idea, spiritual but not religious.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I see his good friend and colleague, John Vervaeke, start or popularize a movement that is explicitly not a religion.
A religion that is not a religion. You should always add the first part.
It's a religion that is not a religion.
That's not the same as just not a religion, or the same as just religion. It's a religion that is not a religion.
Yeah, why don't you briefly explain it again? Because I know you've done it before, but it still messes with my mind. It's like saying a potato, but it's not a potato.
Yeah, he's trying to acknowledge both the fact that many elements of religion cannot be replaced by something else, but he is also trying to say that there are so many elements we now associate with religion, which makes it an impossible option for us to go back to. So he's saying we can't, we can't get rid of it. Like we need it, in some ways, like we need so many aspects of it, but we also can't fully embrace it. And he's like, because, the full embrace of it will end up being nostalgia driven, but getting rid of it will end up being utopia driven. Like we need to acknowledge that we both need. So he just admits that there is a paradox,
Okay,
and that
fair.
is, yeah, sometimes annoying. But I also see, like, like I see why he's trying to do that, and I also think it's clever. It's I know he's not trying to be like strategic. He's not like a grifter or something like that. But I still think it's smart from his position that he's like, yeah, I'm really trying to give everyone their due. Like everyone who's coming show up. Yes, you're
For
right.
sure.
Religion is problematic, or like, yes, you're right. We need religion. It's like,
Okay. But so can you be spiritual without being religious? Even
yeah.
not the Verveki type of religious.
I guess it depends on what is meant by spiritual, but I do know that many people think that they're in that they experience spirituality, but religion, the one of the various etymological meanings that is often emphasized is to bind, like to be
Line back.
bound to reality.
Yeah.
And I don't see those people as being bound. So there's like, so they pick and choose what they like of spirituality. They might take a little bit of the Buddhist tradition or a little bit of
Uh-huh.
the Christian tradition, but they're not actually bound by it. So they can still do what they want. They can, I don't know, for instance, like they could be interested in some Christian mysticism, but they can sleep around, like, and that's that would
Yeah.
be
I
technically
think it's
okay.
also a bit of a semantic issue.
Yes. Well, that's, by the way, like, even Sam Harris has said it, like, yeah, I kind of want to keep spirituality alive in the sense that he is doing all these meditation practices, but it is the word spirituality, and Sam Harris obviously doesn't believe in spirits. So
Because where is the spirit?
yeah, we can't see it, we can't observe it. Like, show it to me,
What do
So
you what do you make of that, by the way? Do you think that he is he's denying things to himself, or do you think he really believes? Like I'm just
yeah.
I'm just really confused by Sam Harris at this
Hmm.
point, because
Hmm.
when he speaks about heaven as a place that he wants to
Yeah.
find with his microscope, with this telescope, I don't, because it's funny because an episode comes up to my mind right now. He spoke with Glenn Lowry, and
Oh,
Glenn
yeah.
Lowry is a African American thinker who used to be a Christian. Now at a later age, he's become an atheist, and I heard them speak together. And basically, they're both like bashing God, or at least Glenn is trying to bash God. And then he asks Sam, like, "Is there a way for you to still see validity in this concept?" And he's like, "Well, maybe God could be." And then Sam starts to try to like describe this. And I'm like, dude, you are no atheist. Like, are you not
Yeah.
realizing what you're describing right now? Like, and he meditates all the time and he tries to
Yeah.
get into these states, but he refuses to acknowledge. And I think now that I've listened to him more also on the recent war that has broken out, I think it's just he's so scared of the totalitarian impulse in the religious that he
Hmm.
will never ever, even if he gets there by argument, he will never ever admit it to himself. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really largely agree. I also find Sam Harris a puzzling figure. Um I'm inclined to say that yes, he would be totally, like, he also said that there are many things that Jesus has said that are quite beautiful. But I happen to not find him that interesting in some ways, because I that's also what you notice when he has some of these discussions, when he gets challenged. He really tries to bring it back down
Yes,
to
yes.
like, you know, a level that everyone can understand and, you know, speaking terms that everyone can agree on, which means that we rarely ever get to explore beyond that. And therefore, like, he tries to do that then in his meditation, and there's something to be said for that. So for instance, the philosopher David Hume, who by he's probably like obviously influenced by a little bit, but he has a sensual understanding of reality. So he doesn't actually believe in the power of reason that much. He thinks there's, I know Sam Harris does, so in that sense they differ. But he believes that our sentiments are far more important, far more telling. So he also says, like, you know, there's no such thing, Hume says, there's no such thing as like an objective moral wrongdoing or something like that. It's really like you can just have an experience of a sentiment in you. You know, you feel that harm is being done, but it's just a sentiment. It's not like there's nothing objectively going on. So Hume is fascinating, but also a dangerous thinker, I would say. But one of the main aspects that I nonetheless find somewhat convincing in him and makes me a bit more sympathetic to his project is that he says, like, I notice that, you know, because he's so focused on these sentiments, he says, like, something like religion more easily captures, you know, us. So like, therefore it has stronger sentiments, and that also means that it is actually a little bit more dangerous. Whereas philosophy, and that was before, you know, Marxist philosophy, so I'm trying to say like 17th and 18th century philosophy, for him it leads to mild sentiment. So it's really like, you know, if we're gonna have a skeptical argument, you know, we don't feel like, oh, but I'm right, you know, like I'm right. It could be that way, but actually, like, it's more easily that it stays more civilized. And therefore Hume notices, like, okay, like his main quote, which I think centuries later was proven wrong, but he says, generally speaking, the errors in religion are dangerous, those in philosophy are only ridiculous, you know. And his point is like, yes, like we can actually, like, it can be super dangerous to think so religiously, because yeah, like we'll be angry with each other for disagreeing on certain things, and you don't have that with philosophy. And I think that's what Sam wants to get to that kind of world in some ways, and he is super scared of religion actually, you know, creating like all these dogmas among people and setting them against one another. But at the same time, I think what's also clear is that philosophy has done a very similar thing, that rational discourse can do a similar thing, if we mean rational in the sense in which Sam Harris means rational, so not the way John Vervaeke means rational. And I would say it clearly shows that, you know, like that was clear from his responses to recent cultural phenomena, where he was very fed up, even though he meditates every day, and where he created actually a lot of people against him, you know, like and not just from religion, but people that responded from political convictions. So, and that kind of shows, like, Sam is not actually against religion, he's just against, you know, that which leads to political action. And therefore, like, he's against indeed the dogmatic religions that motivate people to start killing other people, and therefore, you know, that's why he's against Islamic extremists. But he wants to be consistent and say, like, I'm also against Christian extremists, but they're just less dangerous, you know. And he still finds them a little bit dangerous because he doesn't want them to, you know, dominate the American government, but not as dangerous as Islamic extremists for him. So yeah, I don't know, like, there wasn't really a full-on answer to
It
your
was great.
question.
I like it. I love the tangents. It's amazing. I've actually grown quite fond of Sam Harris as a person. I grow fond of a lot of people that I really disagree with. It's it's this
Good.
thing
Yeah,
where
I
I
mean,
start.
I
Yeah,
sometimes
right.
listen to his podcast. So like,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not,
great.
and I listen to interviews with him. I find him in many issues very clear thinker.
Is it?
So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, for sure. I agree, and he does pursue truth, and that's something
yeah.
that I think
I
is
mean,
respect.
to a limited degree, I would say so. He's kind of like, you know, if we go up levels, then he is like, let's stay here. That's kind of like what he's
Yeah,
trying to do, and he's trying to get us to get many people from here to there, but he's not allowing himself to get from here to there. Like, I'd say, you know.
let's give him some. Oh no, actually, I already did that. mushrooms, but
Yeah, but he's never taken ayahuasca or something like that. So that's
okay.
very interesting.
No, it's just
Uh,
I was saying it because I speak to so many people that I really disagree with,
mm,
and some of them are like good friends of mine because in many ways I care so much more about the way people behave than what they believe. And you know, I just
mhm.
realized that there's beauty in that. And also I find my conversations with people that I disagree with much more entertaining usually. And I'm also much more curious as to like
Yeah,
how
yeah,
they
yeah,
how they respond to disagreements. I find that always super interesting.
yeah,
And to see if they've spoken to people that they disagree with, that they have
yeah,
disagreed with before, because I don't know if you watched the debate between Douglas Murray and Matt Taibbi on one side, and then
yeah.
Malcolm
I've
Glad.
I've
Yeah.
seen sections of it. Yeah,
So recently I
but
got really
not the
into
whole
these
thing.
debates. I thought it was super interesting because Malcolm Gladwell basically has to argue that mainstream what you call it media
Media.
is still trustworthy.
Yeah,
And you just notice that he's rarely ever spoken to anyone outside of his bubble. And that's why he
yeah,
can't debate them. Like he's really bad at it.
hmm
So I find it super interesting to find people that
yeah. I think if I remember correctly, is like it actually sweep the audience. Like it had a record of sweeping the audience towards Douglas Murray's and Matt Taibbi's
yeah.
side. You know, like so it was unparalleled that so many people had changed their opinion during the debate
Yeah.
to the
Yeah, and
skeptical of the mainstream media
it was
side.
super entertaining. It was
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
really
Yeah, but
besides
but
yeah.
to be fair, I also find that a little bit annoying because I like that he was like, what was it like Metiabi, like he kept calling them Metiabi as opposed to Metaibi, and he called him Doug as opposed to Douglas,
Yeah,
so
but
like to kind of provoke a little bit, and that's also why Douglas was like, sorry, Malk, which is kind of funny, but I was also like, yeah, okay, we're 12.
yeah, we're lowering the level.
Yeah.
In that sense, I find it interesting because something I heard Peterson speak about recently, and that is that the Babylon Bee guys, they interviewed Jonathan Peugeot at some point,
Yeah.
and it was almost like this satire game that they were playing with him, and he was kind of going along with it. And I feel like this is continuing, that on the side of the people that are supposed to be like really serious and fixing problems, it's almost turned into a comedy show because the world is turned into South Park. So
Hmm.
this stance is often a comedic one, and I think
Hmm.
that a serious stance is
Yeah.
more and more needed because of that. Because like
Yeah.
if you're not able to take this seriously, then like comedy is good, but it should be on the outskirts, I
Yeah.
feel. And we
Yeah,
put it.
no, I've actually like, so I think you and I like are both equally puzzled and annoyed by Jordan Peterson's behavior on Twitter, which is we can't stand it, like it's awful. Right?
He
And
knows it. He said that he knows it.
yeah, exactly. Like we can all agree it's terrible. Uh no one can defend it. And at the same time, like I know that some people say that or at least some people have argued that he is embracing his role as a trickster figure in some ways, that he's
Big
okay with
mistake.
that. Yeah.
I
Well,
think.
I mean, like,
Okay, that brings me
it
to
depends.
a question I have, which is perfect. I was thinking about it today because I'm trying to visualize the world, and no one helps me with that more than Jonathan Pajot. So why don't you tell me what the carnival is, and why don't you tell me what happens when the carnival ends?
Oh yeah.
Let's
Okay.
do that. Because I remember you telling me about this for the first
Yeah.
time, let's say 2 years back or something.
Yeah.
I was at the train station and you sent me this quote of a book, and I'm seeing it all play out, let's say. So
Hmm.
take it away,
Yeah,
sir.
I don't have it as clearly in front of me, but I can tell you as well as I
Just,
remember is
yeah,
that the
great.
carnival, like, so also in the Netherlands we have a carnival tradition in the south of the Netherlands. It's very useful. I first studied it actually when I took some anthropology courses, and it's really this moment of temporary reversal or inversion to actually, and that actually ends up how should I say it, like justifying the normalcy,
Yes.
so it's like so by the fact that everyone, so I'm just going to speak to the Netherlands now, so, and then I'll get to history and what Peugeot says about it. The fact that everyone gets to dress up, everyone is drunk, like, and it's all these silly songs, that is actually reminding everyone that, like, this is crazy life, and therefore when this is over, we go back to normal life. So actually it has this way of creating the much needed release of tension, because people, like, actually normal life is very oppressing. If you have to go to your office every day, you have to dress well, you're constantly worrying about, like, oh yeah, like, people are looking at me and therefore I should probably dress somewhat nicely, so, and obviously you should be polite, you shouldn't be loud, all these things. So and if you are loud, then people will say, stop being so loud, like, so we're all getting in line, and therefore we're actually building up tension throughout the year. And that's why the carnival tradition for so many is so great, because, like, and now we can reverse it, but actually that helps them to then go back to their normal life and to accept, their usual position in society. And that's, so if we then go back, because indeed, like, this tradition has a super long history, going at least back to medieval times, is that it would also do the same for hierarchical positions. So right now, we live in many democratic countries, and therefore this is a little bit less needed. So we don't really need, a king to partake in the carnival. But back then, power was far more hierarchical. So it was really like, you have the king and then you have his subjects. Mm-hmm. And therefore with carnival, you would just, so if you have like that kind of hierarchy, you would just invert it. You'd have the king be kind of the fool, and people could make fun of the king. And therefore also actually people that were usually at the lower, like, substrata of society, where therefore, like, they were honored. So sometimes, like, slaves were honored in that sense. But I think one very dark twist that Peugeot alluded to, and I know it's the case in some carnival traditions, is that at the end of the festival, the slave gets killed. It's just like, that's when it's over. It's like, okay, and now that was fun, and then they kill the slave, which is just kind of to show, like, now we go back to normal power. Okay, guys, we have to realize this was the carnival. Now it goes back. So now we again show where the power is. We kill the slave. We kill the person and even if, like, he's not actually physically killed, there's still this point of, like, now we make very clear this can no longer happen. Now we go back to our normal hierarchical interrelation that we usually have. And then we'll do this again in a year, so it has a cycle. And, well, I mean, I can also relate it to our current culture, but that was the short answer.
That's beautiful. And I know that the carnival used to go hand in hand with fasting beforehand, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's true.
But
so therefore you would have access, right?
Yeah.
Carnival, yeah.
Yeah, now we don't fast anymore. We just party.
Yeah, or I think what Peugeot said, like, that Halloween usually would be, which is actually relevant to you, because I hear that your partner is very fond of Halloween, but it used to be the case, like you'd create, like, all these monsters in the house, and then you'd have this tradition of I should say, like, submitting yourself to the evil spirits, and that would seem like satanic, like that, exactly. But then, that would then be I should say, like, there would be a variation on that by then submitting yourself to the good spirits too. Like, it also has this function of being like, oh yeah, what is actually evil and what is actually good? But now we only still do one of the two. Which, as I'm not criticizing you, obviously, but I'm saying, like, as a society, that is kind of crazy.
No, for sure. Okay, well, you said that they killed a slave. What does the killing the slave mean? And by the way, the carnival, I think today, did this metaphor, or the way of speaking about it, it applies to everyday life, it seems. I think that was also the point that he was trying to make. And so when the carnival ends supposedly here, I think it will be even more abrupt or damaging, let's say. So what does killing the slave mean on a societal scale?
Well, yeah, I was just reminded, like, this is just a parallel that came to mind, like, that on a personal scale, it could really also be like, the hangover after a heavy night of drinking.
Oh yeah,
kind of in that way. But I would say on a societal scale, so I think he alluded to it when you saw that Will Smith beat Chris Rock at the Oscars.
Yeah,
it was kind of like one of those moments, like the end of the carnival, because it has this way of, like, we're clowns and we make fun of everything, and, like, we don't care, we don't have any values, it's fun, haha. We can just make fun of everything. That's kind of our our society right now. So like it doesn't matter, you do you. And therefore the moment that Chris Rock so I know that everyone sided with Chris Rock, and I understand why, and there it's very problematic, like the relationship between Will Smith and what's her name?
Jada.
Yeah, Jada Smith, Jada Pinkett Smith. But nonetheless, I found it very interesting that, you know, like that he provoked it a little bit, and that is a touchy subject matter, because you know that they have this, this tension in between them, and therefore you're like, yeah, are we just gonna go along at pretending this is still the carnival, like to say like, yeah, haha, we don't care about our relationship, or is this actually a moment like, no, we're done with it, because at some point there comes this impulse like, we've been crazy for long enough, and that means that victims will start to number up, or pile up in some ways, because that
Yeah.
means that actually, oh, you thought you were running the show, well, no, you aren't. And like that's kind of what happened when Will Smith hit Chris Rock in the face. But you can see it in different ways, that it's like, okay, nice, yeah, your try. Or you, for instance, you saw it at the start of COVID, when it's like, when Justin Trudeau said about Canada, like, diversity is our greatest strength, but at the moment that the virus popped up, it's like, okay, we have to close all the borders, and only vaccines for us. We'll give it later to other people. So it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
like, it's kind of this moment like, okay, yeah, we can play it well and fun, but actually when it comes to it, it's like, no, it's just, we're going to show you who's in power. And actually we're also gonna like, okay, I'm gonna talk about the truckers and
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
now, but yeah.
Go ahead.
So no, I mean, like, I
Oh,
don't want to, I'm just saying, like, you could all make all these arguments that
no, for sure.
governments such as the Canadian one ended up showing some authoritarian kind of principles, kind of, I don't know, like, it really started coming up in a somewhat scary way during COVID for some people. I know that's a bit controversial to say, but I think in retrospect, many people acknowledge that that is true. And then the defense of that can also be, yes, but we had no idea what kind of threat we were dealing with. So I know there's a nuance to this. I'm just saying, like, when it really comes down to it, when the carnival is over, they'll show
Yeah.
you who's in power. And, you better either you be on their side, but that might sometimes be sacrificing your ideals or your love of truth, and that's kind of, yeah.
No, for sure. Yeah, I point all of this out, or I brought it up because I think it's important to focus on what bugs you. And part of what bugs me today I was watching a highlight of an entertainment show, a Belgian one actually, randomly. I don't know why. The algorithm has a mysterious way of working
Mhm.
to me. And I was just watching it, and there's just a bunch of like middle-aged people, and it's supposed to be kind of an intellectual show. And
Mhm.
the number of like sexual jokes and just like it was just so like, and
Yeah.
I was just a teenager, like I know this talk,
Yeah.
but it was all middle-aged people, like some of them just openly speaking about having three ways and stuff, and like, it was
Mhm.
just I was just listening to it. I was like, oh my god, like, is this real? Is this
Yeah.
actually like
Yeah.
mainstream? It was like, yeah. And then I think about the average Dutch person here who's like, yeah, that's all good,
Yeah.
gezellig, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
live your
Exactly.
life, do whatever you want. And it
Yeah.
feels that's something that bugs me, because I feel like people just don't realize the gravity of the Hakuna Matata lives they're living. Like
Mhm.
they don't really realize they're not facing up to the responsibility that they were made to show.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah,
feel,
and it's also like, and it's so funny that we entertain all these things, like, I guess marijuana can have some positive effects and all that, but you kind of, like, everyone knows that in some ways, weed is bad for you, and obviously, yes, exceptions, and people that deal well with it, but you also know lots of stoners, like, that actually abuse it, and therefore it ends up becoming a problem, and they end up becoming addicted to it. So it's kind of like, it's this way, like, well, actually, it doesn't have to be that bad, but that doesn't, and then they're trying to dispute the common wisdom that, oh, weed is bad, but it's like, well, actually the wisdom was there for a reason, because it warns lots of people who
yeah,
will not deal with it so well. And that's kind of the same thing with all these yeah, like the sexual freedom. For some people that might actually be a life that's possible for them, but for many people it won't, and it will not make them fulfilled. So it's
oh
nice that
yeah,
they're allowed to do it, but it doesn't mean that you'll get fulfillment out of it.
yeah, for
um
sure. And I feel
so
like no one is telling them that it's bad. Like no one is judging them, so they don't. I feel like a lot of people I don't know why I had this thought today. I think a lot of people kind of want to hear that what they're doing is kind of irresponsible, but everyone around them in society is affirming that what they're doing is fine.
Mhm.
Like it's fine. You're on your fourth wife or whatever. Like that just
So
happens. Like
why do you think that they want people to tell them it's irresponsible?
I think because people have a conscience.
Mhm.
And I think their conscience is kind of telling them, but they dumb it out by listening to the current societal standard.
Mhm.
So I think people will want to believe that morality is culturally defined, but that there's something within that is screaming at them, being like, you brought up the example yourself actually in one of our conversations about one of the postmodern writers who got like dreams telling him like burn your work. I don't know who
Yeah,
this
I
was
know.
again. Like
Yeah. I know. And he just admits that yeah,
that's
so
kind of how I
funny.
feel about it. I think people just in a deeper level they kind of want to hear like
Yeah,
they
that's
know
great.
what some of the things that they're doing are wrong, and I'm no different. Like I have a lot of sins, but I think for me it's important to own up to them and then to ask for forgiveness. But that
Mhm.
process is not happening. The redeeming process is not there anymore. Because what is
Yeah.
there to redeem? You're just everything's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with doing this, or there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with like I hear that so often. Do you think there's anything wrong with this? Like, yeah,
Mhm.
something for sure. Something is wrong.
Yeah, but that's also because of like really our impoverished understanding of what it means to sin, like because now we associate sin with this weird sort of fundamentalist Christian right-wing concept of like you are the sinner, and therefore you're
Yeah.
going to hell, or it's like uh or like how some fundamentalist Christians talk about homosexuality, like hate the sin, not the sinner. It's kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, that's the association with sin, whereas indeed
Hmm.
like as we all know, like it starts way back, and even like I'm teaching Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics as well, and he also says like we need to find the middle road, like the golden mean in between the vices of excess or of deficiency. Like you need to find the golden mean in between that. And he says like because hitting the target, that's the difficult part. Like missing it, that's easy, and therefore you get hamartia, like as a Greek word, which is indeed then related to like hitting the mark. And then
Yeah.
that gets translated as the eventually like the word that we'll refer to as sin in the Christian tradition. And that's something that we can all live with. It's like, yeah, how many of us constantly hit the mark? Like just like every moment of the day, nailed it, nailed
Yeah.
it, nailed it, nailed it.
Exactly.
No one lives that way. So in that sense, it makes a lot more sense to then own, like as you say, own up to it and acknowledge, like, yeah, we are all sinners, but not in the way like, we're doomed or we're going to hell. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I guess whatever you mean by hell. If you have a certain understanding of hell, then yes, sinning eternally will make you go to hell. But it
Hmm.
really depends on what you mean, and therefore, like I totally agree that if you own up to it and you just acknowledge, like, yeah, that demonstrates my imperfections, and it's something that I want to remind myself of, and I want to grow in and develop in, and I do want to hit the mark, like I do want to nail it, but I rarely make it. But I know that if I train myself, I can do it. And that's
Yeah.
so I totally agree with you that
There's nothing that
truth
helps me more
starts
than
with
doing that, to be honest.
yeah,
There's really
yeah.
nothing more nothing that helps me more than just owning up to
Mm-hmm.
my shortcomings and then basically asking for help.
Mm.
That is by far the most powerful thing. And I try to focus on my limitations so that I can move closer to that limitless
Yeah.
self that does exist in my book
Mm.
or Christ, if you want to conceptualize it like that.
Mm.
So yeah, that's I guess why it bugs me. I just
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also like, the alternative is if you just say like, oh, you do whatever you want, there is no mark, right? So it
yeah,
like, so how would you ever know if you hit the mark? Because it's like you were never trying to aim for it. So and then like, okay, so let's say there is a mark, but you don't know where the mark is, you're not trying to aim for it, then probably you're not hitting it.
yeah,
Because how big is the chance of you hitting the mark when you have no clue where the mark is? Like you're just kind of like, okay,
for
that's
sure.
yeah.
Man,
So
I've been I don't know why I've been really obsessed with Disney villains these days. Sorry to
That's
bring this
great.
up. I've been like
It's
I
just a
tried.
funny segue.
Yeah, so we're just talking about sin and evil and stuff like this, and
Yeah.
I'm listening a lot to Disney villain soundtracks. I have a whole um,
Oh,
playlist that I listen to.
like Scar?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
The
great.
Be Prepared song is one of the best songs in my
Hmm.
book ever made, and even the modern version I like a lot. Why do I speak about this? Is that I was wondering if this is like a bad thing that I'm doing. This is something I would normally do offline, speak to Aaron about this because it's kind of like a fresh thought. But so we talk. It's just how it goes. But you ask my partner, and she'll tell you that I'm constantly singing these songs. Anyway, because Jung speaks about integrating the shadow,
Yeah,
so being aware of the evil that lurks within, and trying to integrate it somehow
yeah,
for good. And then I know that Peugeot is like, but could be demons, you know.
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah,
what do you think about this? Like, I'm trying to channel it for good, for sure. Like, I'm trying to.
yeah,
Is it good to expose yourself to some of the poisons to make yourself immune, or
yeah.
do you think it just turns you into
Well,
Peterson on Twitter?
like, so I can say, I mean, like, obviously, like, there's always that risk, but I do remember that at some point, Jonathan Peugeot, he was also defending doing all these movie analyses when he was doing a lot of them, because he was obviously acknowledging, like, okay, it seems counterintuitive, right? Like, I say these, so many of these movies are propaganda, many of these movies have evil elements, but he's saying, like, but I'm aware of it, and that's the point. So I'm trying to be, conscious while watching it, of trying to see what actually points towards, the pattern that brings me closer to truth, and those actually that bring me closer to vices. And uh and by doing that, he's like, yeah, therefore I don't think I'm as affected by it than someone who goes in it mindlessly. And that's also the difference. And I know, like, this goes as far as, like, that some people, I actually had a talk with Marnix about it, a friend of mine, the other day, is like that some people even, they can do that even with physical things, like that they can take certain substances, like they can smoke cigarettes and take drugs, because they know very well what they're doing, like they're very conscious of what they're doing
Yeah,
constantly, and that actually, it doesn't seem to affect them as much as other people who just, like, do it mindlessly. So I'm not trying to say, like, therefore, just know what you're doing and take whatever drugs you like.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just saying there's definitely some truth of, if you know what you're doing,
yeah. But I
you
think drugs are
take
also a
the
little
risk.
bit different because, like, if you do a little bit of cocaine, it's not necessarily going to help you unless
Mm.
maybe you're doing a study of some sorts.
Mm-hmm.
But I I do feel like I'm learning a lot trying to take the perspective of the evil
Mm-hmm.
of the villain, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so it might
Yeah.
be a bit different. But I don't know,
No,
bit of a tangent. I don't. I
no,
just
no, no.
wanted to ask
And
you
I
this.
do, so I actually, I do want to keep talking about this, because I find this very interesting, because I'm also struggling with this myself, because I
Okay.
totally agree that, especially, like, those movies, like what makes many of those, uh, like DC movies, for instance, like the Dark Knight trilogy movies, so good, is that, especially like the second one, obviously with the
Oh
Joker,
yeah.
is like they really allow you and motivate you to start thinking a little bit like him. And by doing so, you're actually aware of what's at stake, and therefore you even more appreciate, the
Yeah.
the countering thing. And they do that, I guess, to some extent with some villains in the Marvel universe. Like, they do it a little bit with Thanos, but actually, I can already understand him a little bit less. So, like, for instance, like, so Thanos was actually also a popular villain, because he says, like, it's fair, like, there's not enough resource,
He was
so
a
we should just
brilliant.
kill.
I thought he was so brilliant.
Yeah, no, he was. So, like, he was still very charismatic, but I'm still trying to say, at least, like, this from my perspective,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Is that his point eventually was, we should just make sure that half the people disappear,
yeah.
and
But
therefore we have enough resources
yeah, yeah.
again.
I just wanted to
And
say one thing about that is that
mhm,
it was. I thought it was so brilliant because it's precisely taking the logical conclusion
mhm.
of the policies some people are trying to install.
Yeah, no, no, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Okay, okay.
But
Sorry. Go
what
ahead.
was interesting is that I think so. I totally agree that actually, like, in some ways they showed there's some evil to it. But
Uh
at the
huh.
same time, what they were trying to do is trying to say, like, actually, this is a totally reasonable perspective, and therefore you as an audience viewer are gonna buy into it because you think he's right. But it's like, but if you actually think about it, like, fairly quickly that he's wrong, that he has
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
it's pretty
wrong.
obvious.
Whereas
Yeah,
with the Joker, it's like, oh no, but like you can actually really get into it and be like, he might actually be right. And he's like, there's such compelling arguments there that is like, whoa, there's actually something to be said for what he wants, you know.
Yeah.
And I obviously have the same to some extent with Nietzsche, that I'm sometimes like, he might be right, you know, in a kind of scary way.
Yeah, how are you gonna impede yourself from drinking out of your boot?
Yeah.
How are you gonna do that? Do you have mechanisms in place?
Um, yeah, I try to stay grounded, and I talk to family members like you and friends, and I have students. So like I'm trying to aim up and discuss that with other people. So I guess those are my mechanisms, and I know that that I I'm counterbalancing it with so many like good influence, and I would also say good ritual. So I don't. So like I think you and I both know from our background is that it's one thing to have these propositions, and it's another thing to strengthen them with the kind of rituals you do with
Yeah.
it, you know. And that's also why vices can be so scary, because what actually happens is that, you know, like you, for instance, you allow yourself to do something, but you also like, yeah, you do something, and therefore it becomes problematic. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that is useful about um yeah, I was actually thinking like there's, for instance, I would say like I'm thinking about like, that there's something, for instance, more problematic about the vices that happen during for instance, the viewing of pornography, as
Hmm.
opposed to the viewing of a movie that has evil in it. Because with the pornography, you're actually somewhat participating, obviously not
Yeah,
really, because but there's something to be said that you're actually performing a ritual while,
I think
you
so.
know, engaging with it, and that actually makes it scarier in some ways, as opposed to what I'm indeed doing with Nietzsche. Is like, I'm not then, oh, Nietzsche and singing all these songs, you know, like I'm not like, I'm not
You
gonna
don't
do
have a
that.
behavior with it
Yeah, no, not really. But I
or
do find it very interesting
participation.
to entertain it, and that's also, I guess, that then relates back to what Hume was saying, is that like, and that I can entertain the thoughts without really it taking me over. Though obviously sometimes it still does, but I'm just saying like that's already so
Yeah,
much more different than other vices, for
I guess
instance.
it's always the dose that matters.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, yeah,
sorry, I just quickly wanted to go back also like to what you said, like because I know that you read all of Wolfgang Schmidt's works, or at least the ones that are available.
yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about his criticism of Jung? Like, because you brought up Jung yourself, and
Oh, the
yeah,
the chapter he speaks about him is called the deification of the unconscious.
yeah,
His biggest criticism is that he thinks that Carl Jung basically turns the unconscious into God.
yeah,
And another criticism is that he understands, well, Wolfgang Smith understands Jung to understand Christ as um, one side of the coin, and the other side is Lucifer.
yeah,
And actually, Christ is like both in a sense,
yeah.
sort of. So it's like you need Lucifer and you need Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a false understanding of God, according
Mm-hmm.
to Smith. And also, he thinks that Jung kind of started a false religion. I don't know if you want me
Right,
to
right.
expand on that, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah. So like, so that was mostly, I think, what I already got from it. But it's useful like to be reminded, because like that then ties in, because one thing that you and I are also amazed by is Bernardo Kastrup, and he is really, and it's also it's really interesting to see, like, for instance, John Vervaeke's lectures on romanticism, where he talks about Schopenhauer and how problematic it is, you know. And then we see what someone like Wolfgang Schmidt, but also other people, can say about someone like Jung, or like what Peugeot says about Jung, you know, indeed, like the Gnosticism that is present in Jung,
Exactly.
and that's
Sorry, that's the
actually,
best criticism, actually. That's how he
yeah.
describes it as well, the Gnosticism.
Oh yeah,
It's like
exactly.
Jung is a
Yeah,
Gnostic.
but Jung knows that, like Jung Jung researched the Gnostics.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, so this is not like controversial. Like, he kind of embraces this.
Yeah, yeah.
But I would just say, like, then it becomes interesting to know to think of someone like Kastrup, who is so influenced by both Schopenhauer and Jung, and you can hear it, and that's why I never like fully, you know, accept his view in some ways, because something about it feels off, and I really respect him. I think he's doing such amazing amazingly important work in so many regards, but at the same time he says things like, my diamond doesn't care about me. My diamond is completely indifferent to how I'm doing. Like, he doesn't actually want the best for me, but he still follows it. So that's very interesting. Or that he's like, we need to help. That's something he takes from Jung. We need to make God conscious. God is actually unconscious. We're making God conscious. So there's all these Gnostic elements that are from Jung that are also in and that, like what he also says, and that's then the Schopenhauerian aspect, is like, there's just this irrational will. It doesn't care about us. It's just doing his thing, and therefore, we need to, how should I say it? We should be aware of that we're just, this brief moment of consciousness from that. So actually, he is in some ways, a far more sour and darker view of, for instance, reality than someone like Wolfgang Schmidt or John Vervaeke. Even though I think he's great, but I'm just saying, like, that reminds me sometimes of.
That's really cool, actually, that you point that out. I think that's one of your strengths too. Yeah, really, because I listen to all these guys, and I can't really. Well, you map it out very well, and you've done that before for me, and that's very useful. Because Kastrup's like, he's a lot.
Yeah,
and to pinpoint his characteristics is very cool.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair to him, so like, I'm really not. I
love you, Bernardo.
Exactly. Like, if you're Bernardo, if you're watching, we love you. But also, like, that he said in that conversation with Peugeot that he has a whole room dedicated to Orthodox icons, and that he so that shows that.
But similar to Jung, huh?
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe not out. Maybe like people don't fully realize what they're buying into, and the person themselves might be much more filled with love and all these things.
Yeah.
But Wolfgang Schmidt's biggest criticism of Jung is exactly this: that he starts a false religion. Jung doesn't even agree with this. Jung wouldn't, I think, applaud people that take his word as gospel. Jung was like, the most sane person is probably a Catholic. And I think Kastrup similarly could do something similar, where he starts something that is not really what he exactly believes, but it's what people take from him, and that can be dangerous. So
I do agree. I would partially nuance that. So for instance, one criticism that Vervaeke is also aimed towards Jung, and that Vervaeke also appreciates Jung in many regards.
Yeah.
But is that Jung, and that's kind of similar like Heidegger. And now that I've read both of them,
congrats, man. I don't know how you do it. Heidegger for me is like, well, I need some help.
Heidegger is fantastic if you discover, even though he's also awful and he was a Nazi, but it's
leave that aside.
Well, I'm just saying, yeah. Well, anyways,
we cut it out.
No, I'm definitely I
understand. You told us before.
I definitely find that problematic.
Okay.
I should say it. Yes, like what they both do is that they actually take a lot of inspiration from other thinkers, and they don't credit them as much. And that's relevant because, according to Vervaeke, this kind of shows that they were building a mystique around them. Like, who is this person? How do they have all this wisdom? And that's actually, even Peterson in some ways buys into it, because he says, like, I would like to know how Jung knew everything he did. And that's partially because Jung rarely tells where he got stuff from,
Yeah.
And so I still think he's great. And I also know, like, he had his affairs, that he had a relationship with a woman, but at the same time,
really,
he cheated on his wife with multiple different people. So
really,
but I mean, like, really, I also think Jung is a great person. I'm just saying, like, these are all aspects that we need to keep in mind, that in some ways, and that's because, like, there was this almost,
wait, I'm losing him.
Lots of women got interested in Jung's work because it makes sense, right? Like, because, like, unconscious. Are you losing me?
You're still here.
Okay, am I back?
Speak. You're back.
I'm still here.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Hello. Okay. I just meant to say, like, he got a lot of female followers very early on, and that's partially because of the mystique, and partially because he had a worldview that spoke to them far more than the scientific rationalism. Like, it's like, no, this is mystical, and it's about the unconscious, and he appreciates the feminine, and therefore I do think, like, so I still think he's great. I'm just saying, like, there's reasons to suppose that actually people like Heidegger, people like Jung did somewhat like had a dark side, which was kind of appreciating that there was this cult being built around them,
Yeah.
that really and that's also what someone like Vervaeke is so scared of, is that he like, okay, I don't want a cult to be built around me.
In
So
that
he's trying
sense,
to
I
do,
really
yeah,
must compliment Vervaeke
yeah,
because I think he does such a good job of
mm,
really behaving the best he can. Like
yeah,
he really embodies the sage for me,
yeah,
and I'm pretty appalled by what you just said. Like, I'm pretty shocked because when I started reading Jung, I was like really enamored with him, and then more and more I started to take some distance. I still read him on occasion, and I find him
yeah,
very insightful and interesting.
mm-hmm,
But I find a person's personal life extremely important,
yeah,
especially with thinkers that have such influence. Like
mm-hmm,
I think it's a really good marker of a person if they're in
yeah,
a stable relationship, and of course sometimes that goes wrong. But
yeah.
if you cheat on a person multiple times,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
that's
so like please like do definitely, you can by the way watch the movie A Dangerous Affair where they show this
oh,
with at least
let
one
me write this down.
yeah, it's a movie with I
Dangerous
think
affair.
Keira Knightley plays Sabina Spielrein, and then you have
Really?
Viggo Mortensen plays Freud, and then Michael Fassbender plays Jung. So it's all
Oh,
these famous
I've
actors.
seen pictures of this. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a great movie, but it's still good. It's still interesting and good to watch because it's based on a book, and you should then look up, and probably there's all these historical inaccuracies, but still you can watch it with your partner. I'd say like it's
Yeah.
it's definitely useful for that. But it shows some of these elements of Jung. Um, and I would also say like I do want to be careful because like we do all have our weaknesses, and he was never like glorifying this aspect of himself,
No, no,
and
no. Of
it might
course.
it might also be that he acknowledges it as a weakness, so I haven't done my research so thoroughly that I know what his stance upon that was, or if he ever expressed remorse in that regard, like all those aspects are also super relevant.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to say like, yeah, he was definitely not a saint in some ways, like he
Well,
was
that helps me. That helps me
I do think he
because
was a shaman in some
no, yeah,
ways.
yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But
I'm just trying
it
to
was,
be a
yeah,
saint
yeah,
myself. Like
yeah,
that's I think it's the answer to the meaning crisis in many ways,
yeah,
societally speaking and personally
yeah,
speaking. I see that really as one of the
mhm,
quests that we should be aiming for. Like for me, it's a every moment type of thing, and you can be very intellectual, but
mm,
that's only a small side to it.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
I really appreciate the perspective. I'm also
yeah.
keeping you for way too long. I know that you have
Yeah, I
other
should
things
probably
to
head
do.
off soon. I do want to mention like someone like Nietzsche is also like how should I say it? Like he is also trying to emphasize always the opposites, So he's also like actually when he was 12, he already thought when he conceptualized the Holy Trinity for himself, because he was then still very Christian. He
Yeah.
also thought that it wasn't God Spirit and Son, it was God, Satan and Son. Like he really thought like God obviously has to like show like
Ah.
dissociate himself from the evil, but that is also part of him, like so in that sense it's interesting to see, because obviously Nietzsche also influenced Jung, and that there is this parallel between them in that regard, and therefore he's also very influenced by Heraclitus, a Greek thinker who is about the coincidence of opposites, and someone like McGilchrist, by the way, is also super influenced by Nietzsche and by Heraclitus. Like Heraclitus is, I think, his favorite philosopher. But to say like there should always be a coincidence of opposites, and in some ways, that's also why I haven't made up my mind about this in some ways. Like I obviously like I have this understanding of the transcendent and of the beautiful and of all these aspects that we can associate with the divine, but I also do see like there is a risk in denying the opposite, and that's what people like Jung and Nietzsche are afraid of, is like that we risk, and Heraclitus, like if we only emphasize the good, the bad will creep up, like, and actually,
Yeah, you
and
can't
therefore
hide
you should
Satan.
be, yeah, exactly, and therefore you should be aware of both of them, and you should try to
Yeah,
integrate both of them and not deny it. So there's also something to be said for that perspective. So
for
I haven't
sure.
fully made up my mind on how to balance that, really.
Okay, guys, listen to Be Prepared from The Lion King if you're still listening, and listen to also the modern version. There's something to it. I take from this conversation like I'll at least try to understand it, but not be overtaken by it. That's for me the most important thing. But I really don't want
Yeah.
to keep you longer. I have so many more thoughts. I want to speak about Mozart, but we'll
Mm.
figure it out.
Oh, I don't even like. I mean, I've listened to Mozart every now and then.
Have you
Requiem
watched
is great.
Amadeus?
Yeah, a long time ago. Like,
Watch it again.
but
Watch it again.
I'll watch it again. I'll watch it
Okay,
again.
okay. It's a
Yeah,
good movie.
that's good, and we can talk about that next time.
Guys, this man is speaking. Big weekend. I'm not gonna be there. I'm really sad about this. I have a test week, and
Mhm.
I really need to do well on this. So I'm sad not to.
It's okay, man. It's okay,
Yeah, I'm
man.
really sad. Is it gonna be filmed actually?
I think it likely will be. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to see you on Wednesday. We are meeting. If people are around in the Netherlands, we are meeting. Can I say this? Is this allowed?
Yeah.
Okay, we are meeting on Wednesday in
Hmm.
Amsterdam with the one and only Paul van der Klei.
Hmm.
And so, if you are in town, if you're interested in this little corner, leave a message. You can join. I think we're also organizing
Yeah.
something in The Hague on Thursday.
I would even say that The Hague is probably even more suitable. Like if both are options for you, then The Hague
Yeah,
is probably better. Also because yeah, we're just going to be walking around a lot in Amsterdam, whereas in The
sure.
Hague they really have this session planned where we can where they can have dinner together, and that's so just saying like,
Yeah,
but
it's super nice. And I'm from The Hague. It's the best city. It's the most highest quality of life city according to world statistics.
yeah.
But it's cold. It's very cold, so be
Hmm.
prepared. But so yeah, that's the last thing. I will see you, so I can wish you good luck then. But
Thank you so much, brother. It was lovely to talk to
it
you.
was amazing to speak to you. We got to
Yeah.
two of my questions, I think, or three. So
More for next time. I'll have
awesome.
to
Always,
interview you at some point because
yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead, man. Start
Uh,
your channel. It's time. You're
yeah.
gonna you should like ride this wave right now of your talk and all these things. I
Yeah,
think it
you're
would
right.
be
You're right.
very cool to
Yeah.
just get it going because I do see interest, a lot of interest in Nietzsche. Jordan Peterson said, I sent you the clip. Nietzsche
Mm.
is what was the question again? Like who's a philosopher that people should
Oh
think of
yeah,
right
it was like,
now?
and then it was like, oh, I don't think they should. Oh, okay, maybe Nietzsche. He's deadly. He said something like that, like
Exactly.
that, that
So
like
I
a
think
philosopher that everyone should read.
for sure. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. And there's a part to play for that. And you're someone who who's internalizing all of that. Well, maybe not
Mm.
internalizing, but taking it in a little bit. So thank you, sir. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you so much, brother.
Thank you guys for
See you
listening
soon.
and have a nice rest of your evening.
Yeah,
Bye bye.
thank you, man. You too.
See
Bye
you.
bye.